Hi guys, and welcome to episode 2 of our brand new series, Drivers Decoded. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about 2016 World Champion Nico Rosberg. And if you haven't already, go and check out our very first episode in this new series, where we talk about Red Bull driver or former Red Bull driver Mark Webber. Now, in that episode, we didn't really go through Mark Webber's career. We just kind of spoke about his key points: the good, the bad, and the ugly. So in this episode, we're also going to be doing the same thing with Nico Rosberg. So Rosberg, as you know, drove for Williams for 3 years between 2006 and 2009, but we're not going to talk about any of those moments. We're going to talk about his Mercedes days, the glory days for Nico Rosberg. So cast your mind back to the end of 2009. Braun Grand Prix have just won the World Championship, and Jenson Button is the world champion. Things couldn't be looking better for the team. But come in Mercedes, who haven't been in the sport since 1955. They've been away from the sport for a long, long time as a manufacturing team. They have been in the sport as an engine supplier, of course. So they come into the sport and buy Braun Grand Prix, and then hire two. One could say a bit of a rookie, the other one a very well experienced driver. On the 23rd of November 2009, Mercedes announced, the newly founded Mercedes team announced that Nico Rosberg would be driving for the team, and driving alongside him a month later, they announced that 7-time world champion Michael Schumacher would be joining him as well. Big shock at the time, like, oh, Schumacher is back for another round. What can he do? Now he's come back into the sport, where he is, of course, the most successful driver of all time. And at our time of recording, still is. So the 3 years that Rosberg and Schumacher shared with one another, you'd expect Schumacher, being the more experienced driver, of course, is a 7-time world champion, 91 Grand Prix victories, and about 155 podiums. You think he would be, he would have the edge over his younger compatriot teammate. However, in all 3 seasons, Rosberg beat Schumacher. In his first season in 2010, Rosberg beat Schumacher by 70 points, finishing 7th in the standings. In 2011, he also finished 7th as well, but beat Schumacher again by just a little margin of only 13 points. And in Schumacher's final year in Formula 1, Rosberg finished 9th, 93 points, and finished 44 points ahead of Michael Schumacher, who, of course, bowed out of Formula 1 for the second and final time. So 3 years for Nico and Schumacher, the kind of the teammates that they were in a newly found team. For Rosberg, that was big. It was absolutely huge for Rosberg that he did beat Michael Schumacher. Some could argue, all right, Rosberg was better prepared for Formula 1 than Schumacher. But think about it. They're both in a new team, new surroundings, new car. And Schumacher has got more experience over his teammate. So surely Schumacher should have absolutely, just obliterated Rosberg, and he didn't. Rosberg put up a bit of a fight and gained a bit of a reputation about it, and everyone started noticing Rosberg, because no one really seen him at Williams. It was like, oh, Rosberg, he's the son of Keke Rosberg, who of course is a world champion himself. It was just like, all right, Rosberg, yeah, whatever. But now it's like, this Rosberg, he's not that bad, is he? He's not that bad. So Lyle, Nico Rosberg and Michael Schumacher, how much confidence do you think that would have given Nico beating the 7-time world champion Michael Schumacher, not once, not twice, but 3 years in a row? How do you think Rosberg would have felt after those 3 years?
Well, I think he would have felt amazing. Both of those drivers did an amazing job coming to Mercedes, which were a new constructor or a revamped constructor under Ross Brawn, who, as you said, was living off the amazing drive with Brawn, his one and only year in the constructor, obviously the winners of the 2009 World Championship. So those two drivers came into Mercedes to help get them into a front where they could hopefully be competing against Ferrari and McLaren and things like that. I think both drivers did great jobs, respectively, really helping them get through. They were quickly thought of as the fourth constructor, behind, of course, Red Bull, who were at the top at that point. Could say Ferrari in second place, McLaren, and obviously those two drivers. Nico off the bat was a great driver. He had the experience, the most modern experience, of course, with Williams. The 2010 car was very good. I think it was Malaysia, which was the third or fourth race in that year, he got onto the podium, and that brought quite a few podiums for Nico in that year. 2011 wasn't great, and of course 2012 was good for him. Michael Schumacher, amazing guy, absolutely incredible experience, of course. I feel like I'm not just telling you that because you obviously know that. the most successful driver. And also, I wanted to say something quickly, Jordan. You said at current time, he still is the most successful. Now, I can't believe you even said that because, of course, Michael's going to be the most successful driver. But you know what? With the progression that Lewis is making, he might not be. If someone's listening to this next year, he might not be. But of course, at that point, he definitely was, and there was no possibility of anyone beating Michael. So, of course, Nico would have felt amazing beating Michael, the man who came back to support the team, but also, of course, not just do that with a pretty face to, get good results himself. Because quickly on Michael, a lot of people thought when he retired in 2006 that was kind of it wasn't right. Even though he was 7-time world champion, they thought it wasn't the best exit for him. So in Michael's terms, it was to come back, help the team. He's good friends with Ross Brawn, to help Mercedes, which were a German constructor. Obviously, he was a German driver. To get also some good results. I'm thinking Michael would have hoped for a win or two. That didn't happen when he came back, but he did very well. Nico would have felt so good to beat not just the best F1 driver, but a fellow countryman and his teammate at this brand new construct. I think Nico would have been on cloud 9 when being with Michael for those 3 years. He was a great guy to work with, and obviously with all the experience, as you said. But Michael was out there hungry, ready for wins and things like that in the second part of his career, John.
Yeah, I think also as well the fact that Rosberg did beat Schumacher, I think it goes a bit unnoticed because like people talk about Schumacher's return to Formula One and of course what he did before, but no one really seems to remember that Rosberg beat Schumacher 3 years in a row. And if you're listening to this now and you're like, did he really? Wow, it just proves that not many people do talk about it. And I think again, as we progress on more with this episode, I think we'll just kind of talk about how underrated Rosberg actually is. I know people have a different opinion on him now, but at the time, I think people were like, didn't really look at Rosberg in the way that they should have done, if you know what I mean. So just staying with them opening 3 years at Mercedes in 2012, to be more precise, it's round 3 at China, and Rosberg takes his very first pole position, and then goes on to win his very first Grand Prix. He dominated that Grand Prix. I remember it so well. It was like, again, I was ready, I was new to Formula One, and seeing someone else win instead of it being a McLaren, a Red Bull, or a Ferrari. Like, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but I was over the moon that Mercedes won the Grand Prix. How times have changed there, guys. So Rosberg takes the checker flag for his first win in Formula One, and of course Mercedes' first win back in F1 since 1955, which is obviously absolutely astonishing. And if I'm correct, I think all 3 drivers on the podium were Mercedes powered. I think the 2 McLarens came home P2 and P3. I'm pretty sure that's correct. But it also took Rosberg 111 races to win his first race, and at the time he was the 103rd different winner in Formula One. It was a big moment for Nico Rosberg, and certainly put Mercedes out there as like a one to watch for the future, because like nobody really expected them to win so soon. And I remember Ross Brawn coming on the radio to Rosberg after he crossed the line and saying, "Welcome to the world of winning, Nico." And that is very powerful words from a guy who's worked with the best, worked at Benetton, worked at Ferrari. He was one of the main guys as the Ferrari's main success at the start of the 2000s. What a moment it was. And also as well, and big, I wouldn't say big weight off his shoulders, but certainly would have relieved a bit of pressure that he got a handful of podiums in 2010, some in 2011, and then of course 2012 kicking off the ground running. Getting finally a race win. And Lyle, yes, first of all, I think you remember that Grand Prix just as much as I do. And for Rosberg, what a moment it was to win your first Grand Prix for the Mercedes. So, like, once again, like how do you think? How much confidence do you think Rosberg had within the team at this point, knowing that, right? Okay, I've won a Grand Prix. What else can we go from here? How many more Grand Prix can I win with the team? Because remember, Mercedes were a midfield team who were winning races and getting on pole positions. It was, certainly we were all thinking these guys are going to become a threat. But did anyone really think Rosberg was going to become a world champion contender at some point in the future? Because obviously we didn't know what the V8s or what the V6s were going to be like. So how do you think he was feeling at the time? and how much confidence do you think you had in Mercedes going forward?
I think that the win that Nico had with Mercedes in China had like Nico written all over it. He was very comfortable in the team. He was definitely the leader of that team at that point because he beat Michael Schumacher, as you said, in 2010, 2011, and so far in that year. Michael had a retirement, I believe, in that same race, and Mercedes hadn't had the best start to the 2012 season, so it came at the best time for them. It was so special for Nico to get there. I remember, so yeah, as you said there, John, we do remember that race. That was probably one of the first years that we really got, into Formula One in proper detail, and that was an amazing season as well. Yeah, it was incredible for Nico to win there. So happy, so ecstatic on the radio. Again, working with Ross Brawn, who, as you said, is no stranger to wins. And yeah, I don't think that people would have thought he was probably championship contender. Nico Rosberg, even before he'd won his world championship. Sorry, I'm jumping the gun. Spoiler alert, if anyone didn't know. Nico reminded me of the other Nico. And the other Nico is Nico Hülkenberg, meaning that he was, because remember, Nico was at Williams, and then, a drab, boring, not a great season that he hasn't accomplished much. Of course, Nico Rosberg beat that with, a podium 3 races in with Mercedes. But it wasn't looking great for Nico Rosberg that he was going to win, because even at that point in Formula 1, he had to really, come in and impress. For example, a few years ago, Lewis Hamilton, his second year in Formula 1, had won the championship. Sebastian Vettel 2 years ago had come in. Second season or third season, had won the championship in 2010. So he had to be quite new and almost impress coming out of the starting blocks, which Nico hadn't done. About 5 or 6 years at that point into Formula 1. But a great show nevertheless. Mercedes as a whole, as I've just said there, the fourth constructor, really impressive. And no one was going to derail Red Bull in that era, in the V8 eras. But what they wanted is to get very, very close to doing that. But Nico was the team leader. He had the team behind him. He had Ross behind him. And of course, this wasn't going to be like a win out of the dark, a bit like what we saw with Pastor a few races later in that year. Nico was for sure going to win races again. But I think at that point, for me personally, like cast my mind back then, I don't think I'd have bet Nico Rosberg to win the World Championship. And at least not Mercedes to win the World Championship, because obviously at that point Nico was about 5 or 6 seasons into Formula 1, and of course the main thing was Red Bull were dominating the V8 eras and Mercedes just weren't on the V8 eras. But as you said there, the regulations were about to change in the next few years, and I assume at that point, Jordan, 2 years to go before the V6s came in, a lot of teams were probably thinking about how to maximise the drivers and the components in the engines and stuff for the regulation change in 2014.
Yes, and those regulation changes came at the start of 2014, as you said, Lyle. And one team in particular was just miles ahead of everybody else. And of course, that was Mercedes. Coming into 2014, they had a brand new driver lineup. Well, they signed them in 2013. But for 2014, it was a brand new start, new cars, new engines. A big shake-up in the regulations for Formula 1, wasn't it? Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton. Now, we've covered over some key moments in Rosberg's career, like his battle with Schumacher, his first win. But now we're going to get into the serious stuff, the stuff that we all like to talk about. And the first point I'm going to bring up isn't Bahrain 2014, because that was some solid racing in that Grand Prix. And to be fair, there was nothing really wrong with that. It was what happened in the Monaco Grand Prix. That happened 3 rounds earlier. 3 rounds later, but not in the Grand Prix itself. In qualifying. So at this present time, Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton have been winning races. One race would be Nico, the next race would be Lewis. One of them was definitely going to be world champion, so the pressure was on for both of them as well. Going into a championship fight, one of them was going to be world champion. So Mercedes easily ahead of everybody else, as like I said. So in Monaco, where track position is critical, so certainly Rosberg and Hamilton will be wanting to be ahead of one another to have a bit of a lead over each other. I think Lewis Hamilton came into that weekend 3 points ahead of Nico, so Nico's already on the back foot. So in qualifying, in Q3, the last part, everyone set out their standard laps, their provisional laps in Q3, the last session of qualifying. Rosberg's on provisional pole. They go out for the last run. Rosberg is on a flying lap, comes into a Mirabel corner, and then locks up, goes straight into the road, the off-road bit, and then has to reverse back out onto the track. And Hamilton's coming up behind him. Yellow flags get waved, and Hamilton has to back out. So therefore, Nico was on pole position because there's not enough time for Lewis to go back around the track to do his lap again because they all do it at the very last minute. So there was no time. Hamilton came on the radio and said, "No, that was very clever from Nico, very, very clever." There was an investigation as to whether Rosberg did it purposely. There was nothing against that. The stewards didn't rule anything out. There was no penalty involved. And Nico would then go on to get, as I said, get pole position, win the Grand Prix, and go 4 points ahead of his teammate at the time. So this incident in qualifying that Nico did, of course he did it on purpose. Of course he did. He would have known again how critical track position would have been. He probably would have took a leaf out of his ex-teammate's book, what he did a few years ago when he locked up coming out of Raskas, the last corner, I think it is. Again, he literally parked in a parking bay. Schumacher did to stop anybody else getting pole position. Rosberg did the same thing. I know it. When I look at the footage, it just looks like he's asking for a lockup.
He's learning from the best. His ex-teammate, Michael Schumacher, probably told him, he said, "Well, I did it coming out of Raskas. So all you need to do is just go for a low-speed corner and then do a mistake and then you get it." Because, they say that Monaco qualifying is the toughest day or the best day for a spectator of Formula One. And when I went to the race this year, they said that, I overheard that, basically the race, and this is kind of a downer for fans, this is quite a bit of a downer for fans that go to the race only, but they say that the race only counts for 5% of that weekend, meaning that qualifying, they say, the race, if you get qualifying right in Monaco, it's 95% done. So of course in this position, it's not just like a normal track where Lewis could rectify it in the race. If Lewis started in second and Rosberg was in first, then Rosberg would almost have it in the bag. Exactly. Because Monaco, there's no chance to overtake in the race, or very little chance anyways. So that's why Rosberg did it almost. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, he would have known definitely that, all right, if I get pole position, I'm more or less going to win the Grand Prix. I'm going to have the upper hand on Lewis in this World Championship battle. And this is where the little kind of mind games started. And this is probably where the headache for Mercedes kind of started for them as well, trying to keep these two drivers at bay, because it was going to boil over at some point, wasn't it? That these two being at it for the World Championship. Of course, it's only natural. So in my opinion, Rosberg did it on purpose, definitely. Lyle, what's your thoughts on that? Did Rosberg intentionally lock up at that corner just so Lewis couldn't get pole position?
Well, firstly, I just want to go on a bit of a tangent. But you said we were going to skip over Bahrain 2014. Of course, there was nothing big when that, just normal racing by the two Mercedes drivers. Nico was put on the back foot when the team intervened. Paddy Loeb messaged Nico and said, Nico, stop it first before Lewis. And on the podium of that race, which is only round 2, I believe, in that season. So really, the round 2 of the almost a dominant Mercedes engine, because 2013 Mercedes was almost like another chapter. And on the podium with Brian Johnson, who's from Gateshead, Nico Rosberg said to Brian on the podium that I strongly dislike coming second to Lewis. And if you didn't know that Lewis and Nico were they weren't just friends. They said that they were very good friends. Now I remember when Lewis first came out with that, and that it was a pairing made in heaven when he signed for them at the end of 2012 for the 2013 season. But they were, apparently when they were 8, 9, 10 years old, they would go racing together. Obviously, Keke and Nico and Lewis and his dad would go racing. And I know you might be thinking that's quite strange. A British lad from Stevenage who obviously his dad had to do the double to get Lewis to drive, was friends with the son of a Finnish-born German Monaco world champion. But they were good friends growing up, and it was a match made in heaven when they were put together. So there was the rivalry sticking out even at the second race. Now this coming in was a big boiling point for it. Lewis Hamilton said in an interview that they weren't friends, that they were competitors, and that rivalry was showing. And of course you want to beat your friends, but it probably wasn't as devilish as it obviously turned out to be. Now, as I just said there before about Monaco being a very important day, it is the most important day for Formula One. To get Monaco qualifying right is so important. And again, track position, as Jordan said, I mean, we all remember what happened in Monza with track position, meaning that no one got any because you all waited until the last minute. So qualifying is a very hard game to judge, and it's very exciting. Again, as Formula 1 fans will know that it's more exciting than anyone else looking in, just setting one fast lap and then that's it. It's really, really important. A little kind of tactic by Nico, of course, but I don't think that he would have gone out thinking, when he was in the garage, he probably didn't think that he was going to go and lock up into, what was the corner? Mirabel. And I don't think he would have done that, Jordan. But what I do think he would have done is, I think that he would have thought about maybe doing something to impede Lewis Hamilton on that lap. Because, of course, drivers want to win. And I don't want to say that drivers want to be dirty, but, I mean, whatever it takes to win. That's what the thing is. Drivers, whatever it takes to win, they will do it. Oh, yeah. So my guess is that Nico didn't think that he was going to lock up. Because, again, that would have hurt Nico's tyres. That would have, maybe not looked good on the car. Nico could have smashed it into the barriers. And he could have got a fine, he could have got a penalty for reversing in. Anything could have happened. So I don't think that he would have wanted to lock up. But, as I said there, I do think that he would have probably thought about doing something to impede, hold up, or something like that to Lewis's lap, and indeed anyone else's lap as well, because obviously everyone else was charging on that lap. That's what I think. I don't think Nico would have wanted to lock up, but he would have wanted to kind of make sure that he had the track position and no one else would have had the best chance to possibly knock him off pole position in that race. Little mind games again, like you say, Jordan, and obviously that opened up really the first chapter in the Lewis v Nico saga. Obviously, and then as I just said there, Lewis coming out with that statement of we're not friends. I think a lot of people read into it a lot when it came out because, I mean, Formula 1 drivers, of course, that is that strained relationship. But with a pairing of Lewis and Nico who went on about their childhood bonds of how they grew up together and go-kart together and things like that, it was a massive move that for the weekend, qualifying, and of course what he said. And as I say, I mean, this was the second year into their partnership at Mercedes, but obviously a 20-odd year partnership of those two. It was massive. So my final thoughts on Monaco, I don't think that he would have intentionally wanted to lock up, but his mind games, something in the back of his mind probably told him to do something to impede Lewis's lap, so obviously Nico could remain on pole position.
I think he would have seen his data and looked at he was probably down within the first sector, because I'm sure that was the end of the first sector where he was at, and thought, I'm down, right, let's try and do something. I mean, we won't know the official story, because Lewis says Lewis will say that he did do it on purpose. Nico saying he didn't. He might come out in a book in the next 10, 20 years. He might admit it. He might say, oh, this is what really happened. He might say, yeah, I didn't have the intention at first, but it was just like a bit of both. Like, maybe I didn't want to lock up, but like I broke a bit too hard. And
also,
I thought,
as well, John,
I'm not gonna save it.
Just quickly, it's also the pressure that Lewis was putting him under. So again, this isn't Nico's psyche, but Lewis will have, of course, been in Nico's head. And with Nico having such a relaxed teammate, just bringing back Michael into it. I mean, Michael was going for it for sure, but I don't think he was as hungry as Lewis, of course, in his second stint.
No way.
So Lewis would have been in Nico's head, especially after Bahrain. So again, that would push them to do mistakes. That's why drivers have to have a very very shallow memory, meaning that if there's anything gone wrong, they need to just get rid of it. Anything that's happened on that day, if they've tripped over on the way to the garage, they need to forget about it, because their lap needs to be just them, nothing else. And Lewis would have been in Nico's head, and again, like you just said about the telemetry, and obviously because the telemetry, everything improved after 2014 in terms of how we saw Formula 1. And yeah, Nico probably saw that. He probably saw in the garage before he left, and he probably, Nico probably knew. He probably knew, even if it was just a hunch, that Lewis was ahead. And as well as that he might have intended to do something, I think Lewis might have put Nico under pressure and caused him to do that. And again, it's only a freak of the moment. It's only a thing of the moment. He'd have seen him in his mirrors and he thought, right, I'll get him. And I'm not going to lock up, but like if I'm going to do something, it's going to be now, isn't it?
Yeah.
He might have intended to go wide a little bit or on the marbles, but it turned into something bigger. As I say, I don't think he would have intended to lock up for himself, but yeah, Lewis would have got in his head, messed with his psyche. Nico would have probably wanted to play mind games with him, and then they boiled over. But I mean, Jordan, this was massive. This for Lewis to say we're not friends. We're serious competitors is true, but it's to show that this pairing with Nico is not it's not a like a little skip through the vineyards kind of thing that people saw in 2013 when he left a pretty cosy relationship with Jensen to go to an even cozy relationship with Nico. This was we're both going for something serious here. And it even gave us as fans in Formula One a kind of wake up to think, right, don't look at Nico and Lewis as a friendly pair, and a bit like what we do with Lando and Carlos. Look at us as competitors, and obviously that set the stage for what was to come in 2014.
Oh yes, I think it was also like the first time we saw like a different side of Lewis. Like we've seen the young kind of happy, jokey on type of Lewis at McLaren, and then probably in his first year at Mercedes, and then once he knew where they were in terms of in terms of the championship, and knew where they were. Right, okay, we can fight for wins and championships now. Right, serious head on, because I want to win. I don't care what Rosberg wants. Rosberg can be happy, do whatever he wants. Me, I want to keep my head screwed on, keep focused, because I want to be the best I possibly can. And he seen potential, and as we know now, sitting here today, he definitely took it with both hands. So in the 2014 season, it continued to go Hamilton. I was going to say Bottas there for a minute. Hamilton, Rosberg, just back and forth, with Ricciardo winning 3 races in that year when Mercedes didn't. So it comes to the last round in Abu Dhabi. Lewis Hamilton leads by 17 points. So you're thinking at this point, he's got a very comfortable lead over his teammate. But a bit of a disclaimer for you: there's double points on offer this weekend. So it's up for it's anybody's grabs at this present time. It's anyone's game. Well, I say anyone. It's either Hamilton or it's Rosberg. So anyone, them two drivers, of course. But it could go either way. So we're on the edge of our seats. We're finally on for another championship battle. 2013, the previous year, it was Vettel. Vettel won it in Japan, I think. India, sorry. With about another 4 races to go. This one, we're going to the wire. Yes, get in. What's going to happen? Rosberg had the advantage on Saturday. He got pole position. Hamilton, of course, was P2. So the race gets underway, but Hamilton straight away gets Rosberg at turn 1, which is what he would have wanted at the start of the race. He would have been like, right. He would have been practicing start on the simulator, on at the end of the pit lane, everything he could have done. Right, guys, this is the setup I want to get away from Rosberg on Sunday. This is what I need. And obviously he would have planned this beforehand, just in case he would have been starting P2, because Hamilton, definitely being the driver he is, would have been well prepared for it. So, race gets underway. As like I said, Hamilton overtakes Nico at turn 1. The race is going fine. Hamilton's building out a bit of a gap, but of course the race has still got a long way to go, different strategies and stuff. But then on lap 23, all hell seems to break loose in the Rosberg camp, because he comes on the team radio and reports of power loss. There's no power. Okay, Nico, we'll investigate for you. So straight away, all of us are like, oh, okay. I hope it's not going to be too serious, because we do want a championship fight going all the way to the end. Then 2 laps later, his engineer comes on the radio and goes, "You have lost ERS, your energy recovery system." Now that is a big defeat. That's probably not as severe as a total engine blowout, of course, but he's lost a lot of power. And a lot of power assisting him to catch up to his teammates. So straight away, at that given point, when that message goes out to everyone, straight away it's like, Hamilton's won. Hamilton is a world champion. If he can finish, of course. Actually, in fact, he was 70 points ahead, so really Hamilton was champion regardless. So it was inevitable that Rosberg was going to retire, but at the end of the Grand Prix, his engineer again came on the radio and said, "Look, at Nico, you're going to have to retire the car because these problems are just so severe. It's so critical that you retire." Rosberg responded with, "No, I would like to finish if that's okay, because of he's put up a fight all the way through the season. He wants to end the season on a high/low, if you want to call it that." So I respect Nico for that. But Hamilton, of course, crosses the line, wins the Grand Prix. He had to finish third or higher to win anyway. Just it didn't matter when Nico came. If Nico won the race and Hamilton came second or third, Hamilton would have still been champion. So really, Rosberg was like, well, it doesn't matter. What's the point in trying? So of course, he finished 14th in the Grand Prix, loses the World Championship, and of course, his teammate, his arch rival at the time, Lewis Hamilton, wins his second World Championship. Very, very hard to take for Rosberg. He's worked so hard in his Formula 1 career since 2006 up until this moment to become world champion. This is his first season where he can genuinely fight for world championships, and he's lost right at the end, and it's out of his own hands. He would have been absolutely distraught with himself. He would have been kicking himself. So, Lyle, yes, we all know how Rosberg would have been feeling at this point. But how much of that do you think it affected him in 2015? We're not going to talk about 2015 as a whole, but we know Hamilton won the championship with about 3 rounds to go. Rosberg was not on his game at all the following year. So do you think that the 2014 race, the 2014 season affected Rosberg, obviously because he lost the world championship at the very end in a way that was out of his hands? Or do you think that it was just Hamilton was better the following year, Rosberg got over it, and he just couldn't keep up with Lewis the following year?
Well, going back to 2014 Abu Dhabi, it was the first year since 1994 a British driver has been up against a German driver, so it was very special. Double points, I absolutely loved that. One of the best things by Bernie to make Formula 1 more enjoyable. But yeah, it was really, really unfortunate by what had happened. Absolutely heartbreaking. Hamilton wasn't better in that season for sure. They were both equally. I wanted to see a good tussle. I really did, and it was one of those things to lose ERS, to lose the MG UK. It wasn't. It wasn't the team's fault, of course. It was just a normal sod's law kind of problem that you see in Formula 1. Nothing really could be done about it. Nico's mentality to say, I want to finish the race, I thought was pretty good, because I'm not saying that Lewis would have probably retired, but in that kind of mentality, as I say, Nico, it was more of his vanity, I think, showing that he was still a team player, because they still could have scored points. I don't know where he did finish, but I don't know where he was going to finish when he was still in the race, but he might have scored points, you never know, but he just wanted to finish anyways, to show that he was not going to give in without a fight. It was unfortunate for Nico. I think that it would have affected him, because you think about, if you go up against like a Michael Schumacher in his Ferrari prime, and you can't beat him, you might kind of become more humble about that and think, oh, well, do you know what, I gave it a go, but I was up against an amazing, foe. Fair enough. Like, for example, when you hear Felipe Massa talk and Rubens Barrichello, when they were beaten by Michael Schumacher, they were kind of almost fine about it, because if they were going to be beaten by one person, for it to be Michael is quite great also on them. It's a little bit like when in football, it's like if you get beaten by Liverpool on the last day, you will obviously stay and watch them lift the trophy, because you've been beaten by Liverpool and you want to see an amazing team, or Man City or whatever. But on the other side, though, to go up against someone who you were almost beaten, you're very level with, you've got a handful of races, a handful of points, so is he, and you've taken it to the wire, and you've got within touching distance of that trophy, which Nico had. His first, of course, Lewis was already a world champion with McLaren in 2008. So Nico was so close to beating Lewis, to basically, showing that he's been at this is his 5th season with Mercedes. He's turned them into a world championship winning team, and he's done it. That's more heartbreaking for me. So he would have heard that unbelievably heartbreaking news. His vanity, he didn't break anything on the radio. He showed his vanity, he showed how calm and mature he was to say, I'd like to finish the race. He showed that he was quite calm when he got out of the car as well. He was fine about it, and he celebrated with the team, because remember, the team, they'd won the Constructors' Championship, which I believe was in Russia that year, which was the first Russian Grand Prix back in Sochi a few races ago. So he'd done that with the team, which was a great feat, because remember, he was at the team since 2010, so he built the team. So he would have been happy from that. And I think it was second place in the World Championship that year. So again, done very well the season. But as I say, to get that close, John, and to lose it is heartbreaking. And again, like I was saying about the memory thing, Nico probably had to move on quite early. But that's such a big blow. I think in 2015 it would have affected him a little bit, but only made him hungrier. But when I was just saying about a rival going up against a rival, 2014 he had the edge over Lewis, and of course he could have beaten Lewis. He was so close to actually beating him. But in 2015, Lewis was absolutely unstoppable, and that's when the dynamic changed to I think Nico would have kind of seen a better competitor in it. Oh, well, I'm going to lose to Hamilton. He's better than us. That's fine. But it's Lewis Hamilton. It's a guy who we used to be friends with. It's a guy who has had tangles with in Bahrain of 2014, of Spa in 2014, and of course the last race in Abu Dhabi in 2014. So it's not a great foe. But Abu Dhabi was heartbreaking just because he was so close. He could have beaten Lewis Hamilton then, and I know it's unfortunate. It was nobody's fault. It was definitely not the team's fault, and definitely not Nico's fault. But that was probably his last chance to beat Lewis, because when we, as I've just said there, when we saw Lewis in 2015, we thought Nico has got no chance. Lewis dominated. He won in the US Grand Prix in Austin. Again, probably one of the highlights of 2015, because obviously as a season, that was not one of my favourites at all. And in that season, probably one of the the thing that showed Nico it kind of lost a little bit was that scene in Austin in the debrief room, just when Lewis Hamilton's won the championship. He's in Austin. Lewis is an honorary American almost, because you know how he loves that place and he's got all these American friends. So he'd done it in almost his adopted home, and he was on top of the world 3 times. Yes, second constructor for Mercedes, on top of the world, elated. And then he went in that room, calming down a little bit, gave his cap. He shook the cap at Nico, but for sure Lewis would have been full of so much, happiness. He'd have done that as a bit of fun. Then obviously Nico sees that as, God, you cheeky, you just hit me with this cap, and obviously wallies it back at him. To me, John, that showed that Nico had kind of lost it with Lewis, and a little bit like Mark. So in the first episode when we talked about Mark Webber, it didn't seem like he was losing it with Seb, but Multi 21 got to Mark a bit. And again, that was in the debrief room where, the words did come out. To me, the cap gate, it showed that Nico had lost it a bit. And in that cap, in that throwing of the cap, he had Abu Dhabi 2014 and all the other run-ins that they'd had kind of in one. And it's like, if I hit him on the head, I'll forget about it and move on to another season. And he didn't. But, just recapping, obviously Abu Dhabi 2014, horrible for him. He was in touch and distance, and led on to a 2015 where Nico, he'd have been hungrier. He wanted more. And of course, we know from that season, because Lewis was unstoppable, that did not happen for Nico. And at this point, Nico has changed from a guy who he could have had a world championship. He was up against a friend. He's now lost a world championship, and this friend has turned into a 3-time world champion. He's technically, at this point, he's 2-0 down in the team. Lewis has got 2 world championships, and he's only been there for 3 seasons. Nico's been there for 6 seasons come 2015, and he's got no world championships. So Lewis is 2-0 up, Nico's 2-0 down, and this really affected Nico much more than Mark and Seb did when we talked about Mark Webber.
Yeah, exactly. I remember, just briefly talking about 2015 there for a bit. At the end of 2015, when Hamilton won the championship, I thought it was like, Rosberg had his chance in 2014. He was very unlucky not to win it in 2014. 2015, I thought, right, I think Rosberg will come back, will bounce back and do just be a bit better. But he didn't, and I'm like, I generally couldn't see Rosberg winning the world championship at that point. And I was like, I think Hamilton's just going to run away with it again in 2016. But 2016 is where we're going to go on to next. So it's round 5 of 2016 season in a certain place. I think it's called Catalonia for the Spanish Grand Prix. I don't know why I'm bringing this one up.
Just a bog standard race.
When I was doing my research on Nico and like thinking about points to talk about him with, this race kept coming up, and I don't know why. But I read into it. It seemed interesting, so I thought I'll add it in anyway, and I'll see if you guys do find it interesting. So just a bit of a background before that. Rosberg is on a 7-race winning streak, stretching back to the end of 2015. It's one of the first 4 races of 2016. He's on fire at the moment. 100 points. He's got the upper hand on his teammate. Spanish Grand Prix rolls round, and Lewis Hamilton is lined up on pole position. And just a quick one on that one, and I know I don't have that wrote down on my notes, but I remember Lewis's lap time because he got a 1:22 dead on that year. I remember that happening. I was just like, oh my god, that's amazing! How good's that? 1:22.
It's Rain Man. It's not Jordan. It's Rain Man on the other side.
It's amazing. I was like, wow. I was proper amazed. And yeah, anyways, so that's out. Who put 50 pence in the tink? Let's leave that to one side. So Rosberg and Hamilton's on the front run of the grid. Hamilton, they both get away, and Rosberg gets Hamilton into turn 1. Go around the chicane to turn 2, and then coming up towards turn 3. Rosberg seems to go down on power just a little bit. Hamilton goes on the right hand side to go and overtake him. Goes on the grass, loses control of the car, goes sideways, careers into the side of his teammate, taking both cars out of the Grand Prix. So, like, just let me know what you think of that, because it doesn't sound like a big deal to me. Of course it's a big deal. It was a huge moment in Formula 1. I mean, I watched that race live. I'm just like gobsmacked. I'm like, I don't know how. Do I celebrate? Do I cry? What do I do?
It happened so, Jordan. It happened so quick. It reminded me of Spa 2012. Do you remember that crash into La Source?
I remember that
with Grosjean, Alonso, Hamilton, and Co. Yeah. It happened so fast because again, like, I was watching it as well, obviously, it just happened like so fast, and it was crazy, and then it was over in a few seconds, But it was a few seconds of, actually probably about 2 seconds. But then it opened the floodgates to a massive, it changed Formula 1 for the bad, for the worse, really. But great to watch.
Oh yeah, it was just literally like, do you know when like again, just a quick one. Let's say if you're carrying like a very expensive like vase, or if you're carrying like some plates that like your mum's like, all right, you carry them, just be careful with them, and then you drop them. It's smashed to pieces on the floor, and you're standing there going, "Did that just happen? Oh my god!" It hasn't like sunk in yet. Like you're still trying to process it. That's what that was like. It was like what just happened? So yes, and it was just like a big talking point after that. Who was at fault for that particular thing? So it was like, okay, who was at fault? Hamilton or Rosberg? Of course, none of them was going to take responsibility. Absolutely no way. So we left that to the pundits. I can't remember what we said about the matter. I think I was still too happy about the Verstappen win at the time. You know, being the Verstappen fanboy that I was back then.
Fanboy, yeah. Nobody,
exactly.
Nobody, just quickly, honestly, I'm a Red Bull fan. Nobody cared about Red Bull. It was all about Max. And they opened the floodgates literally for Max to win, because if they didn't do that, Max probably wouldn't have won, and it would have changed the dynamics of that Dutch guy completely. Because his win after that was sometime later. I think it was Mexico 2016 or Malaysia, one of those two. And yeah, Spain wouldn't have happened if the Mercedes didn't crash. So Max, if you're listening to this, go to bed, and when you get up tomorrow, go to see Lewis and Nico and thank them for really giving you the opportunity to win. Exactly. But yeah, so that was great. But back to the silver arrows.
Yeah, exactly. But who would he thank? That's the thing we're going to get onto. So Rosberg, after the race, says that he was in the wrong engine mode and lost power. You can see it on the telly where his red light starts flashing, meaning there's like low energy, and he's charging his energy. Hamilton obviously he's not expecting it, but he sees a gap. He sees Rosberg. There's a bit of a gap between Rosberg and the grass. Hamilton goes for it. You can kind of see Rosberg kind of turn right as Hamilton goes for it. Hamilton obviously takes a void in action, and it's just he probably tried to keep it on the grass, but he just lost it. Of course, cold tyres and everything, it wouldn't have helped. We've seen it before where cars go on the grass. I mean, famously, if you remember, Monza 2011, when it was Alonso and Vettel, and then in Monza 2012, it was Vettel-Alonso when they were both pushing each other off the track. They were on grass, but none of them spun, because the tyres would have been up to temperature, quite grippy. So, of course, it was never going to stick. So Rosberg says that. He also said afterwards, and I quote after the race, he says, I made it very clear I wasn't going to leave any space on the inside, and I was very surprised he went for the gap. So Rosberg saying that he kind of went in on the inside, maybe as like he wasn't concentrating because he was too busy faffing on with his buttons, which then he wasn't expecting Hamilton to go in for the gap. But surely you would have been concentrating in your mirrors. If you are going to concentrate on your buttons, you've got to make sure in your mirrors that no one's around you, just in case you do make a sudden move of like lack of concentration. So I'm like, right, okay. And then after the race, Nicky Lauda, being one of the head guys at Mercedes, and Jackie Stewart blamed Lewis Hamilton for that incident, but Sky Sports and one of the best F1 drivers of all time, Anthony Davidson, said that Rosberg's move was very aggressive. So again, a lot of people on the fence. Well, one side was Hamilton, one side was Rosberg, and some of them were on the fence. Again, I can't remember when I said back in 2016 when we did our review, Lyle, but I would say Rosberg. Now I know. I'm not sure, but I know people. If people are listening to this point, then if you are, well done. That you've bared with us for about nearly 45 minutes. Credit where it's due. But Hamilton fanboys will probably get on my case with this one, thinking,
yes.
sorry, you know what I mean? Like people who don't like Lewis are like, oh, you're just defending Lewis, you're a Hamilton fanboy. I'm not. Okay, I'm not. I'm a McLaren fan. All right, leave me alone. And just by the way, I mean, thinking about it now, it's a hard one, isn't it? It's like it just happened, because you got Rosberg goes in on right. I don't know what Rosberg's thinking. Do you know what? Actually, do you know what? I'm gonna scrap. No. I'm not gonna go. I'm not gonna say it was Rosberg's fault. I'm gonna say they were both to blame. I'm going on the fence. I'm playing it safe. I'm going on the fence.
Yeah.
Because Rosberg should be more aware as to who was around him. Hamilton surely, maybe, should have went round on the left-hand side. But of course, lesser grip, and of course Rosberg would have had the inside line at the next corner, which Hamilton wanted. So, yeah, I'm going to put the blame at both drivers' doors. Lyle, your thoughts on it? Let me know. What do you think? Are you on Rosberg's side, Hamilton's side? Are you joining me on the fence? Because it's quite lonely up here.
Well, I mean, I remember seeing that moment. It was absolutely incredible.
It was incredible.
So one of my favourite quotes in Formula One, which I've said before, I think I said that last week, which is from the amazing Ayrton Senna, who said that if you don't go for a gap, you are no longer a racing driver.
Yeah.
And Lewis Hamilton, basically, again, in his quote, said that that's what racing drivers do. I saw a gap, and that's what I went for it, and that's what racing drivers do. Now, the racing line is nowhere near. You have to be solid on the left to take that corner, or going uphill into into Sector 1 in Catalonia. Just quickly also, Jordan, as well, from the photos that I sent you of the Formula 2 race that I was at, when I went to Spain this year, I sat and watched a Formula 2 race where that crash was happening. There's no screen around there. It's not really a good general admission players, but if you were sitting there, what a great view you'd have had of that crash. I was just like, that's all I could see in my mind. But yeah, it was a bold move by Hamilton, but because he was behind, I just think it was Hamilton's fault. Rosberg wouldn't have seen him in the mirrors. Now, again, I'm going off. So, Martin Brundle said after Sebastian Vettel illegally rejoined the track and hit Lance Stroll in the racing point in Monza 2019. I'm going off what he said, which is with the halo, with the hands device, with the headset, the mirrors are like a chocolate fire guard. There's no point in having them on the cars because you can't see anything. You can't turn your head at all, period. There's no halo at that point, but again, there's all the hands devices and things like that. So Nico would have not been able to see Lewis Hamilton, or very rarely, won't have seen Lewis to the extent that you would, like if you were driving your road car. He didn't move on the telemetry. He didn't move much, but he was blocking off the move from behind. And again, the rules state that you are allowed to make one defensive move. I remember 2016. Belgium with Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, that was revamped there because of Max moving over. I think it was about 3 times on Kimi Räikkönen on the going up Radeon. So again, the rules state that you are allowed to make one defensive move, and that's what Rosberg did. Again, he wouldn't have expected Hamilton to be there. It was a racing incident to the max, and they were both to blame a little bit, John. But I think that Hamilton was more to blame because he was behind. It wasn't the right place to overtake. It was a heat of the moment thing. I think as soon as Lewis commits, as soon as he puts his eyes in the inside, he commits to that move, and Lewis needs to make it stick. He needs to get in front of Nico before the turn starts and that the curb appears, because if he doesn't, he'll catch the curb and he'll spin. He might crash into Rosberg. He needs to be ahead, so he needed to have committed. So once Lewis made that move, there was no getting out of it. And obviously Lewis would have never have backed out, because if you do that, you may as well just pack your bags and get out of Mercedes. He's a 3-time world champion. That's just a pathetic thing to do, to back out. So he was never going to do that. He'd already committed to the move. But as you say, it's not the right move. You can't go on the left-hand side of that very quite tight corner in Spain. So both to blame, but more Hamilton. Massive racing incident, something that the team was they couldn't believe. There was a big dint in Toto Wolff's table, and that's, I think, where the fist came from. It really changed the dynamics of team orders in general and the atmosphere at Mercedes, and that's when, obviously, if it hadn't happened already, that's when people started taking sides, and that's when Mercedes became a tale of two sides. It wasn't the Silver Arrows, as you might call them now, because obviously Lewis and Valtteri have done most of the repairing, but at that point it wasn't the Silver Arrows. It was a Silver Arrow of Lewis, and it was a Silver Arrow of Nico. And again, just what John was saying about the fans, because you were either a Lewis or a Nico. Unfortunately, you couldn't be a Mercedes fan after this incident, because it basically broke up the team. You had to take sides. So my side is they were both at fault, but I do think Lewis Hamilton firstly, he did get more of the blame in terms of the team, but of course, he had to treat both drivers like they were, just a racing incident. And Lewis was the more famed out of them both, because obviously he was a 3-time world champion, double world champion at Mercedes consecutively. So he was obviously the one he was the golden boy, and obviously the number one driver. But Lewis, I'd say, was more to blame. But a massive racing incident that just changed the dynamics completely. And one of the biggest things to happen, even still in Lewis's career, he could beat Michael's record, and he'll still say, when he retires and writes a book, as John likes to say, he will still say that Spain 2016 was one of the biggest moments in his career. Because when we look back at that in 26 years, or 26, I don't know why I said that, but we look back at it in 26 years, randomly, and we'll think, okay, that's the 10-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. I can't believe he did that stupid move on Nico. But yeah, a blink and you'll miss it moment. Once Lewis committed to that move, he had to do it. It was a sticky situation that both drivers couldn't get out of, and it was only going to end. That's the thing, Jordan. It was only going to end one way, and that was going to crash. And yeah. I don't know. So as you said quickly, obviously about Red Bull, because of that, people were probably diverted from the fact about, okay, Lewis and Nico, it could boil over in this race. As John said again, 7 times, he was going to be the most successful driver in consecutive wins, because again, the driver who he was going for, surprise, surprise, was Michael Schumacher, trying to beat his record. So if he won in Spain, he'd have done that, extend his lead in the World Championship, and blah, blah, blah. So if Red Bull didn't switch the drivers round, people might have been more inclined to really realise that Lewis and Nico could have boiled over in Spain, and it did. But of course, I'm only saying that out of hindsight, because obviously, you can't think about something beforehand. But as I said, Jordan, the main thing is that was not avoidable at all. Not at all. Not in a million years. And I'll tell you what, if you get a time machine, which we all know you have, if you get your time machine out and go back to that race, 12th of May 2016, I believe it was, and if you go back to that race and do it again, I don't care how many times you have to press reset, you will never get another outcome. Lewis will crash into Nico, Nico will crash into Lewis, but the result will still be they will both end up out of the race in the gravel, and Max will win. And as it's one of the best races of modern times, in a season that, even though it was dominated by Mercedes, was still one of the most entertaining seasons we've seen in a very long time in the modern Formula 1 era.
It was a great season, in my opinion. Yes, I know that. Yeah, as I said, Lyle, Mercedes did dominate, but I remember 2016 for all sorts of reasons, and this is probably where it all started for me, especially this 2016 Spanish Grand Prix. This is where the rivalry kind of peaked, but ended. If you know what I mean, I know there were still rivals throughout the remainder of the season, but it never got as close as it did then. I think the team went, right, if you guys do this again, we will terminate both your contracts. Well, maybe not that extreme, but maybe like a hefty fine, or I don't know, maybe even a race ban for okay, one race you, because it boiled over to the point of where, like, yeah, it was going to end in tears, and it did end in tears for both of them. So like they had to sit them down, talk them over. And Lewis said that in the next 10 years, he will reveal what was said in that room. I'm very, very intrigued as to what was said in that debrief room after that incident. But I think we've only got like another 7 or 8 years to find out. So obviously, as we've spoke about the 2016 Spanish Grand Prix a lot. So the season progresses on. Mercedes just absolutely dominate the season. They won every race bar 2 that year, Red Bull winning the other 2, Verstappen winning in Spain, and Ricciardo winning in Malaysia, because that was when Hamilton's engine blew up. Oh no. I mean, again, that was like oh my god, Rosberg actually might win the championship here, because I had me doubts. I won't lie. I had me doubts about Rosberg. I went, I think Hamilton's a stronger driver, but we'll see. Hamilton does it, and I'm like, oh, Rosberg, yes, come on, because I like to see a new guy win races, a new guy at the top winning championships. It's like, Hamilton's done it all. We've been through the Vettel era, we're now in the Hamilton era. I want someone else to win, and Rosberg was doing just that. So it comes to the 2016 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. No double points on offer this time, but once again, it's Hamilton against Rosberg. Only one of them can be world champion. Can Hamilton go for 4, or can Rosberg go 3? 3. Can Hamilton go for 3? Or can Rosberg go for his very first Grand Prix, his very first World Championship? So, race gets underway, and it's just pretty much plain sailing from both drivers, no problems whatsoever. But until it comes to the end of the race, Hamilton knows that Rosberg's in a World Championship winning position. I think he's in second place at this point. Now, if Rosberg finishes outside of the podium place, Hamilton wins the championship. So Hamilton starts going a bit slowly. Well, first of all, this team comes on the radio and says, the pace is really, really good. I'm happy with this. But then laps, coming down. Rosberg's still in P2. So then Hamilton starts slowing down. His lap times go slower and slower. His team come on the radio. Hamilton, you need to pick up the pace. Rosberg is behind him. Of course, he's not going to do anything stupid. But who's coming up behind him? Sebastian Vettel. He tries and goes for a cheeky move. Then all of a sudden, Max Verstappen wants to play. Oh, do you want to play Verstappen? Well, he gets involved as well. And then it went from, Rosberg's guaranteed world champion to, hang on a minute, Rosberg might not be world champion here. What's going on? The team are on the radio to Lewis. Lewis, you need to speed up. And he's like, no, at this moment in time, I'm losing the world championships. I'm doing everything I can to win it. Which again, just, of course, he's the champion. But I thought it was a bit cheeky from Lewis doing that. But nevertheless, I thought, this is going to be a very spicy end to the Grand Prix. Comes round to the final corner. Rosberg finishes in P2, wins the World Drivers' Championship by 5 points. Wow, amazing. It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Rosberg had finally done it after 2 years at the top, beating Lewis Hamilton. It was amazing. Absolutely incredible. Rosberg on the podium. Yeah, obviously wins the World Championship. 5 days later, he announces his retirement from Formula One. What? What a big shock that was. It was a massive shock. I wasn't expecting anything less, if I'm honest. I wasn't expecting anything else other than, I wasn't expecting that for sure. It was just crazy. Rosberg quits F1. I remember that headline on my phone. I'm like, no, this is fake. It has to be fake. It wasn't fake. At the gala, he announced that he did what he set out to do, and he wouldn't want to do it again next season. Which is weird, because halfway through 2016, he signed a contract for 2018. So again, that just proves that no one else expected it to. Expected him to retire. It was mad. It was such a shock. So, Lyle, what was your thoughts on Rosberg winning the World Championship, and your thoughts as to what he did 5 days later?
Well, firstly, so let's go into the race. Yes, hey man, I'm losing a championship here. Lewis Hamilton, in my mind, was one of the most immature things that he did in that race. So he was leading off the race, going quite slowly. I believe it was Sebastian Vettel in third place, and Lewis was basically pushing the pace back so that Sebastian would catch Nico. And if this happened, that means that Nico wouldn't have been world champion, and that Lewis would have, and he was just trying to extend his lead. Now, really immature from Lewis. I can't believe that he did this. Heat of the moment, again, like I've said before, drivers will do absolutely anything to win. But, he wasn't given any support to his teammate, the guy who he has been friends with, had loads of battles with, and the guy who, as I've just said there, he is in the same team. Mercedes won the 2016 Constructors' Championship alongside, Nico and Lewis. All of their problems, but they were still teammates and they were still friends, and there's no support. There was no support there by Lewis at all. It showed what kind of a driver he was, that when things weren't going, a bit like Sebastian, like obviously, of course, all the drivers can make mistakes. Sebastian Vettel made a mistake when he, not made a mistake, but when he threw his toys out of the pram, theoretically, obviously, when Daniel Ricciardo won those 3 races in 2014 and Seb didn't and went to Ferrari. It felt like he jumped ship because he couldn't keep up with the new gun of Daniel Ricciardo. Same with this. Lewis Hamilton, amazing, #blessed, you're the best fans in the world when he's winning. When he's not winning, when he isn't ahead, when it's somebody else getting the... he's quite petty. It's like Christmas Day with your brother. It's like, of course, they're going to steal all the presents. He was quite an immature, selfish person when he did this. He was pushing the pace back. To say that to Bono, that I'm losing the World Championship, just showed to the team that's what he's doing that on purpose. He's doing it on purpose, trying to get Nico. So if Nico makes one mistake when the pace was high, no problem. But when Nico makes a mistake when the pace is low, Vettel gets him, Verstappen gets him. So he was doing this out of spite. It's not just Hamilton trying to win the World Championship, it's to make sure Rosberg doesn't. And that's what's really annoying about it. It's not about Hamilton going for the World Championship, even though by default, of course, if Nico didn't win, Lewis would have won. But it's about Nico not winning the World Championship. And to be honest, if Lewis did win and become 4-time, I think that he would have said that in the next 10 years, in this elusive book that we're all waiting for. He would have said, it's not about me winning 4, it was about denying Nico 1. I couldn't believe Lewis did that, to be honest. It wasn't great. In my mind, that's the lowest point of his career. He's had an amazing career, and obviously he still is, going for to become the best Formula 1 driver of all time. But in this, book, in this career, that is definitely one of the lowest points of him. He let the team down, and he let us down watching. And in my mind, it felt quite sad because he was doing this to let down this guy who we'd worked with for so long, and who we should be quite, congratulatory about. It's a little bit like go back to Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel. Webber saw 4 World Championships, constructor-wise, he inputted into, but he saw 4 drivers in Sebastian Vettel. And Mark was not petty. If he was, it would have destroyed him. Because it's like, you're going to work with the guy who is... You've been at the team longer. You've been in Formula 1 longer. But he is dominating in World Championships. Now, Mark didn't really lose a sight. He didn't kick off at Sebastian for being better than him. Nico didn't with Lewis, but it was shown that he just couldn't take anyone beating him at this point. I didn't agree with the move. I thought it was horrible. I thought it was ill-judged, wasn't great. The team should have said something about it, but obviously at that point, who really cares? Thankfully, it went right. Nico won the race. And one thing that stands out to me, John, is what we always joke on about, which is the radio message to Nico after the race, after he won the championship. So when Lewis crossed the line in 2014, Prince Harry of the royal family got on the radio in Abu Dhabi, said, congratulations, Lewis. Something cheesy like, England loves you. I don't know, something like that. 2015, it probably got some high-flying American celebrity to do it. He's had messages from all the big wigs, Ryan Reynolds, I remember, Tom Brady. And then in Abu Dhabi 2018, he didn't win the World Championship there, but he already had. And he got a message from Will Smith, who apparently was his best friend. So you had all these big wigs supporting Lewis Hamilton. And again, going back to the Spain 2016, when you've got Team Lewis and Team Nico, but you can't have Team Mercedes. It's either one or the other. Lewis had more of the fans. Nico didn't. So when Nico crossed the line, you had Paddy Lowe, who was, yay, effing world champion, amazing. A few other people just saying, well done, Nico, on the radio. And nobody else kind of going crazy apart from his wife, Vivian, who came on and went, oh, Mocky, amazing drive. Mocky being a nickname. I mean, it's cringy, isn't it, John? We cringe a little bit at it.
Very cringy.
But
I hate it.
But to me, it's because there's no Prince Harry there. There's there's nobody to kind of share in this elation of Nico winning the World Championship. So his wife's got to kind of come on the radio and say something that sounds a bit cheesy, and obviously he responds with, we did it. And it makes me feel quite sad, Jordan, to be honest. It makes me feel quite sad that nobody was there for Nico. It felt like the team didn't support him. And it felt like they'd sided with Lewis Hamilton. And again, if you go into that season, it feels like they'd sided with Lewis to the bitter end. And you never know. Ryzen Toto Wolff, Niki Lauda, Paddy Lowe, Pete Bonington, James Allison, they might have wanted Lewis Hamilton to win the World Championship. Paddy Lowe was actually on Rosberg's side, but you never know. He might have wanted Hamilton to win the World Championship. To me, that's what it felt like. Abu Dhabi 2016 was a race that I think, even though Rosberg won the World Championship, he probably wants to forget, because for me, it was quite painful to see him go through that experience of losing touch with the team. It was the final straw that I think he just couldn't take anymore. He'd won the World Championship, incredible. He was the second Rosberg to do that. So he basically is in an exclusive club only with the two Hills, which is Graham Hill and Damon Hill, of being father-son world champions. And so that's a very selective group. Yep. So Keke came, it was a great day for them. And it was a great day for Mercedes, obviously, who had wrapped up the fourth, something like that, Constructors' Championship, fourth, I think it was. It was great all around, but I think Nico just couldn't take the fact that they were giving Lewis all this praise and this commiserations, you haven't won, rather than Nico's, your first place, absolutely amazing, incredible for that. And that leads me on to the Nico retirement thing, Jordan. So there's 2 points that I have in that is Nico has achieved what he wants in Formula 1. A lot of people do that. They achieve what they want and then leave. For sure, we obviously support that. He's had a long career. He'd been in Formula 1 for 11 seasons, 10 years at that point. He had built Mercedes from the ground, almost from the ground up, with Michael in 2010. He'd had some great fights. He'd won their first race after 2 years. And then he'd won the World Championship. He was a family man at that point. He had done everything he wanted in Formula 1, and he was a guy who wanted to enjoy the thing, so he left. I understand that completely. That's great. But I've just said about the team, I think that he was losing it with the team. They supported Lewis more than him, and I think that he couldn't work with Lewis for another season, and I think that's what pushed him into retirement. Not so much so like Mark left said because he couldn't work with Sebastian, but I think that Nico's kind of unworking. He couldn't work with Lewis anymore, especially after Spain, and I think that's what pushed him into it. But for sure, obviously, the main reason is because he'd done what he wanted in Formula 1, and obviously he was a family man, which, for sure we understand that, respect that. We knew that he was. We knew that he was different to Lewis Hamilton in the way that he was a family man. Obviously Vivian came to all the races, and obviously I think he was having his daughter through that year as well. So, we understood the move, but it was such a shock. And I remember just last thing, John. So we were in the old style F1 debate show at that point, and breaking news, and we released a video that I had to quickly amend. John was at work, I think, and I had to quickly amend it with Nico Rosberg announced his retirement. Now, of course, we're much better at improv now, but back then we weren't. So
I'll let you guys be the judge.
So obviously back then, I did a video and I hated it. I put it right. I'll tell you what it was. It was before a video that we obviously congratulated Nico Rosberg, but we said Nico was going to stay, as Jordan said. He'd signed till 2018, and Lewis and Nico for 2017. The rivalry's still there, but first Nico Rosberg announced a retirement. But yeah, John. I mean, I respect it, obviously, but in my view, he did it because he just couldn't work with Lewis Hamilton anymore. The ties had been cut, and I think that Abu Dhabi, after what had happened in Abu Dhabi, there was no kind of getting away from that. What Lewis had done, almost cost Nico the World Championship. And do you think that's why Nico retired? Because of Lewis? Only a little bit. Obviously, I've said because, family, and obviously he had been world champion, which he wanted to do. But do you think he did it because he just couldn't work with Lewis anymore?
Possibly. I remember him saying after, explaining his reasons why, is one of the facts was that he didn't feel like he had the energy or the willpower to go on and beat Lewis again. Like, he's done it once. He's like, I'm ending on a high. I'm ending as world champion. He became the first driver to win a world championship and then announced his retirement the following year so that no one would defend the title since Alain Prost did in 1993 with Williams. So, right, it was a huge shock because I thought he wanted to give it another go. Yes, I respected that as well. I respected that. All right, he wanted to end his career now, which would be the perfect time to do so as world champion. That's all because you're not going to come back and defend your title. All right, people seeing that as a bit of a wimp's way out. But I don't really see it as that. As like I kind of agree with you, Lyle. I think it's all right. Yeah, all right. I respect that. Brilliant. I would have liked to seen him come back, but nevertheless, yeah, all right, fair enough. I think, yeah, certainly, I think he would have been like okay, the team are kind of building around Lewis. I kind of feel like the outsider in a way. I've done this. Do I want to do it again? Can the team support me enough to do it again? Probably not. I think they'll favour Lewis so that Lewis will win another championship in 2017. Nah.
In a way, Jordan. In a way, just quickly,
exactly what you did.
Nico had been there since 2010, and he had really. They say Lewis had built the team, but Nico built the team from 2010 with Michael. He built it from this very small, this very small team with Ross Brawn, this very small idea to what it is now, or what it was in 2016. Lewis came in 2013 when the car was kind of already on course to being good. V8, the V8 2013 year wasn't amazing, but obviously Lewis got the one and only win there in Hungary, which was a good race from him. He was quite humble. That was the end of chapter 1 of Lewis, as we were saying before. It changed from McLaren Lewis to Mercedes Lewis, more feisty Lewis. But yeah, the team for sure gave him more support. I think it was the championships, but also the Spain 2016 incident, John. Honestly, I think that to me, that changed a lot. The dynamics of the team changed. There weren't a unit anymore. There weren't one team anymore. It was a little bit like Multi-21 with Red Bull, that it split the team. There was Mark and there was Seb. There was not any. There was no Red Bull anymore. And it's the same with this. There was a Nico and there was a Lewis, but there was no more Mercedes, or at least as a unit anymore. And people kind of had to take sides. And, maybe Nico leaving was a type of, cleaning the slate, letting Lewis have another teammate, let Mercedes build itself up again. When I say build itself up, I mean Mercedes was still, multiple world constructors champions. I don't mean like anything like that. I just mean that it was quite, that collision changed everything. I think Spain, counted for something much bigger than it just looked on the TV.
Oh, absolutely. I think, I agree. I think like the team was split in half probably since 2014 in a way, and I think it only got worse and worse as the years went on, and to the point of where it's not Mercedes anymore. It's either Lewis or it's Nico, and then of course Valtteri was announced that he was going to be in the team. It's like kind of repaired that in a way, and it repaired it quite quickly to the point of where you won't get. I don't think you'll ever get that again at Mercedes. I think even in Formula One, I think drivers seem more. I don't know. I couldn't see it happening anywhere else. Like maybe with Charles, if Charles and Max were at the same.
That's
team,
what a lot of people are saying. That it's going to happen. But obviously, if you say it's going to happen, it's not going to happen. With Nico and Lewis, we didn't think it was going to happen. Then it did happen. So it's going to be the teammates that you don't expect it to be.
Yeah, exactly.
And to be honest, Jordan, I don't think it's going to get that feisty. But we were literally talking about this a few moments ago. The team that I think it might happen at, especially if they get more competitive, is Lando and Carlos. A great partnership, get on, they're Tweedledee and Tweedledum. And, if McLaren get more competitive, what is going to happen to their rivalry? It's not going to get as heated as Lewis and Nico. I can definitely stamp that out, because that's probably going to go down as one of the biggest rivalries in sport. It's probably almost like Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier level. But what's going to happen? It definitely opened the floodgates to rivalries, but almost kind of the ugly side of the rivalries. What we don't want to see again, because that was tipping the team almost to the absolute limit. But obviously, as fans, it was fun to see, wasn't it? Because we saw rivalries and battles that went just past on-track action. We saw a lot of off-track action as well. I know it's a lot of talking, a lot of politicals, and a lot of debriefs and waiting for Lewis Hamilton's book to come out in 8 years' time. But that's what it was. It opened not just on-track action, it opened off-track action as well.
It certainly made a lot of memories for us as F1 fans. Like this rivalry, it was good to watch. And when it did boil over, it was like, of course, me and you, Lyle, we aren't really Mercedes fans. We're not really like Lewis or Nico fans. But as like F1 fans, it was amazing to see them boil over, and that's what we want to see as well. We want to see like people like locking horns with each other, like at each other's throats every race. Like he said this about me, and he said this about me.
We never. We've heard of the great rivalries in the past, John. Even before we were born, like Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost, Piquet and Mansell, Hakkinen and Schumacher, things like that. Probably most famously, is obviously Prost and Senna, as I've said. So it was, to us and to many people that are listening, it's probably kind of the modern day Senna and Prost, and what happened in that might have gone better, might have gone worse, but in our minds, that's how Senna and Prost was, back in 88, 89. Back in with McLaren.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it was on that level, certainly, to probably to a point of where, like I think I said might have been in the first episode or recently, I said that Prost got to a point where, like he said, he couldn't work with Senna anymore. Then I think eventually maybe Lewis, that if Nico had stayed and then was always there or thereabouts, or that, maybe Nico could have went, okay, look, I'm leaving next season because I can't work with Lewis, and that could have been his reason. Or even Lewis could have went, look, I'm leaving because I can't work with Nico anymore. Like it would have got to a point where one of them would have been kicked out or pushed out of the team. But ultimately, Rosberg made the bigger sacrifice. So it does leave us, with some fond memories in Formula One. And if you did miss out on that rivalry, then hopefully you will get another rivalry very soon. There is some brewing. Certainly in the future, there's one coming our way very soon. There's a big storm on the horizon, but we don't know what we're going to call it. Is it Storm Charles and Max? Is it Storm Lewis and Max? Lewis and Charles?
Lando and Carlos.
What's the storm going to be? Who knows?
I'm just saying, watch that. Watch that. If McLaren get more competitive, watch that rivalry. But it's great to see that the primary stages of those two, Jordan, isn't it? Lando and as I say, Max, Lando and Carlos.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
I don't want to say that's how Lewis and Nico started, but
I really do.
I don't know, wind the clocks back to when they were friends, when they were kids growing up in karting. Apparently, that's what it was. They were all happy-go-lucky friends. And I'll tell you what, just quickly, Charles Leclerc and Pierre Gasly. Now, they were two I know this for sure, I've looked into this. They were very good friends when they were growing up. Obviously, Pierre did a lot of racing in Turin, in Italy, in Monaco, in Lyon, and places like that. Obviously, Charles Leclerc from Monaco. Very good friends when they were kids. And when Pierre Gasly got promoted to Red Bull, and obviously Charles Leclerc got promoted to Ferrari, Pierre went back, Charles stayed. That was looking like it was a feisty rivalry. To something that could have boiled up to something bigger, because obviously they were childhood friends like Lewis and Nico, and from different countries like Lewis and Nico. But obviously with Pierre going back to Toro Rosso, it's not like that at the moment. But you never know. Watch that space. Obviously good childhood friends like Lewis and Nico, so you never know. But as John said, a lot of rivalries kind of in the making, in the process, in the pipeline.
Oh, absolutely. Certainly the future of F1 is looking very good. But yes, I think we've rambled long enough, don't you think, Lyle?
I do think so.
If you are still listening, then I think you deserve a knighthood. You deserve a damehood. You deserve everything you get if you listen with us for another hour and 20 minutes. But anyways, guys, this has been obviously, thank you very much for joining us as well in this episode. Are you enjoying the new series as well, like a podcast kind of styled series of Drivers Decoded? We've got a new one coming out, of course, next week as well, so join us for that as well. If you haven't already, go and check out our preview yesterday for the Russian Grand Prix. Tomorrow, big day, of course, it's the F1 Debate Show. I mean, I know you guys all wait for that. I know you do. Don't lie, Lewis, don't lie. And then on Sunday, you'll be joined by the guy on the other end of the line, which is, of course, Lyle, doing the review for the Russian Grand Prix. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you are new around here, then please subscribe as well. On that road to 1,000, it's in sight. I can see it just a little bit, just a tiny bit. I'm like millimeters of it. I can see it, but it's getting there. We're getting very close, aren't we, Lyle? But anyways,
yep.
Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you later.
Cheers, guys. See you later.